It's a homeowner's nightmare, and it's been going on for nearly 20 years. Basement walls are crumbling. Few seem to know why, and it could cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to fix. Troubleshooter George Colley investigates the link between the homes and what could be causing the problem.
This wall is totally destroyed. There's nothing you can do to repair it.
Concrete basement walls are not supposed to look like this. The cracks are horizontal, vertical, diagonal.
You can't put any epoxy in it. The wall's it's moving now at this point.
They're found inside and outside homes scattered throughout eastern Connecticut.
At least one a week, sometimes two a week. The phone's ringing pretty much all the time.
50, 75 that I've probably been in.
And they're all in the same general area in eastern Connecticut here?
Yes.
That space is a result of the wall expanding.
Dean Soucy's a general contractor out of Tolland. Don Childry is from South Windsor. There's close to 75 years experience between them. Neither has come across an issue as serious as this.
The fix is the foundation, the concrete has to be replaced.
Replaced, as in removing the existing basement walls and repouring the concrete. For homeowners, it's more than just a hassle.
You're looking at a minimum of $125,000, upwards of $200,000, $250,000.
Is that covered in insurance?
No. Insurance companies absolutely will not cover anything.
We were the first ones.
Linda Tofolowski and her husband built this home in Tolland back in 1984. A little over a decade later, the distinct cracks spread through her basement. She contacted her insurance company, which immediately denied coverage for her claim.
It was terrifying. As a homeowner, it's your biggest investment.
Over the next few years, she says she went to the town, the state, and eventually the courts. No one could help. The Tofolowskis spent tens of thousands of dollars out of their own pocket replacing the foundation, then moved to Stafford.
We're honest people, hardworking, and it devastated us. Know that we're not going to have a retirement. We're still going to have to work.
Linda felt all alone dealing with the problem until discovering she wasn't.
The houses that have failed here.
Her stacks of files are from homeowners she says she's spoken with who had the same issue. Linda says she learned all the failing foundations were poured between the mid-1980s into the 1990s. Insurance companies immediately denied each claim. And she says there is one more connection between them all.
All of these are J.J. Modis.
As in J.J. Modis Concrete Company out of Stafford.
The theme here is that they were J.J. Modis foundations. I've never encountered anybody that had a foundation failure such as this with anybody else's concrete.
Joseph Callahan's seen this problem as a building official in both Coventry and Manchester.
You could have a catastrophic failure of the building. If the foundation crumbles, it's supporting the wood frame structure above it. It could be, it's a life safety issue.
Many know there's a problem. Very few can guess what's causing it. Donald Childry thinks he may have figured it out.
There's some bad concrete that's been poured. It has pyrrhotite in it, and it starts to grow inside the concrete.
Pyrrhotite is an iron sulfide mineral. Research suggests if in concrete aggregate, the effects could be disastrous. Over time, water and air oxidize the pyrrhotite, creating a chemical reaction. This causes the concrete to swell, leading to the cracking, eventually separating the home from the foundation.
It's map cracking. The cracks run every which way. That is not normal cracking. That is not settlement cracking. That is definitely connected to the pyrrhotite.
In one region of Quebec, Canada, the government set up an emergency fund to pay for hundreds of homes with crumbling basements affected by pyrrhotite in the concrete.
Pyrrhotite is pretty rare in Connecticut, but according to the U.S. Geological Survey, it is found here in Willington at Becker's Quarry. Becker's Quarry is owned by the same family which owns J.J. Modis Concrete. And the company has confirmed to us that this is the place that they've gotten the stone for their concrete aggregate for years.
Sources confirm pyrrhotite was found in testing on some foundations with Modis poured concrete. Court records mention reports which describe an iron sulfide chemical reaction creating the problem. However, we cannot determine whether or not the mineral was present in all of the failed basement walls because most were not tested, and settlements of litigation with their insurers prevent homeowners from disclosing the findings.
This is years of work.
The Tofolowskis took Modis to court, alleging claims for product liability. In 2003, the company was found not liable for installing faulty concrete based on strength testing, and a finding that the problems with the foundation were caused by the installer rather than a defect in the concrete. However, we found no record that the concrete was tested for pyrrhotite. The court also found their claim fell outside the 10-year statute of limitations. Representatives from J.J. Modis declined to answer our questions on camera. But in a statement, the president of the company, John Patton, says they've done 10,000 residential, commercial, municipal, and state jobs since 1998 without any reports of a problem. Patton goes on to say he's aware of no projects since '98 having the, quote, recently discovered pyrrhotite reaction. Patton says they use the same materials for residential, commercial, and government work, adding the latter two, of which are rigorously tested and inspected prior to and during installation. We have and continue to meet all of the standards of our industry and the regulations of the state of Connecticut. The company acknowledges they've just begun working with managers, geologists, and testing labs to review manufacturing methods and materials. This review began this week after we started calling them. What the statement doesn't address are the problems encountered with concrete poured from the early 1980s until 1998. Contractors tell us the issue is it often takes longer than 15 years for the foundations to show signs of failure.
You see it's cracking down through here. I got another crack coming in this way.
Walter Zaldwey built his home in Wellington in 1988. He says he was involved in putting up every piece of it.
And who was the concrete company that was hired?
The concrete company was J.J. Modis Concrete that was hired to deliver the concrete.
He's just discovered a problem.
Within the last year, these were just hairline cracks, and now they're opening up. I had put caulk on there to just try to seal things up, and now they're just expanding and growing.
He says his insurance policy dropped coverage for foundations 7 years ago.
At that time, I really didn't think too much about it. But now that I'm looking back, I said, you know, how'd they get this information to decide they weren't covering basement foundations anymore? That goes right up through. Wow.
Now, Walter must make the decision to fork over money he doesn't have or just walk away from his home.
I spent a good part of my life trying to work and have the American dream of owning a home, to have it fall out from underneath me.
George Colley, NBC, Connecticut Troubleshooters.
The state says it's reviewing contracts to find any jobs done by J.J. Modis going back to the 80s. UConn is doing the same.
They've also told troubleshooter George Colley the company hasn't worked on campus in years. And that made what George found today all the more interesting. Here's his story.
We have asked the state for weeks to identify which buildings J.J. Modis may have worked on at the UConn campus. They have repeatedly told us, as has UConn, that they've had no jobs going back to 1995, until we came to campus today to find the truck preparing to pour cement.
After repeated denials by University of Connecticut officials that J.J. Modis Company is supplying or has supplied any cement on their store's campus since at least 1995, we witnessed the light blue and white J.J. Modis truck pouring the concrete footing for an addition to the on-campus Radcliffe Hicks building this afternoon.
The whole back corner, the cracks, all the cracks are coming down the side.
The troubleshooters first reported on problems with residential foundations in which the concrete was supplied by the Stafford Springs-based company last week.
I can almost fit a finger in here.
More than 100 viewers contacted NBC Connecticut with details of how their concrete foundations failed or are failing. Contractors say they've seen many more.
The common theme here is that they were J.J. Modis foundations. I've never encountered anybody that had a foundation failure such as this with anybody else's concrete.
The foundations move so much, the jam is over about 1.5 inches.
The viewers who contacted us say their foundations were poured between the early 1980s through 1996.
The concrete is actually expanding right now, so it's in motion.
Contractors say they've seen issues through 1998. The foundations in each case needed to be totally replaced.
You could have a catastrophic failure of the building if the foundation crumbles.
Less than 12 hours after our initial investigation aired, Governor Dan Malloy responded.
Is the state aware of this issue?
Yes, I've been briefed on it. We are looking into it. Obviously, this is going to require a fair amount of monitoring, both on the private sector side, quite frankly, on the public sector side as well.
One of the first calls the troubleshooters made was to the University of Connecticut. More than $1 billion were spent on campus construction for the UConn 2000 project starting in the 1990s. University representatives repeated several times that the J.J. Modis Company is not working on any jobs and haven't for as long as they've controlled records. So how is it the company is on campus now? University representatives say their records show payments to general contractors, not subcontractors. In a statement, UConn says this concrete, as well as all concrete used for university projects, is independently tested adding the strength tests are to ensure that the in-place concrete has attained the strength specified in construction documents. Any concrete supplied to the university which fails to attain the specified strength will be rejected and replaced at the contractor's expense. Some contractors say an iron sulfide mineral called pyrrhotite is to blame for the residential foundation failures. Research suggests the pyrrhotite oxidizes from air and water, creating a chemical reaction causing the concrete to swell, leading to cracking, eventually failing. They say it could take decades for the issue to arise. The U.S. Geological Survey shows, and J.J. Motus confirms, pyrrhotite is found in the quarry where the company has retrieved stone for its concrete aggregate for decades. In a statement last week, J.J. Motus says they've received no reported issues with concrete poured after 1998. John Patton, who identifies himself as president of J.J. Motus, says the company has produced 10,000 residential, commercial, municipal, and state jobs since 1998. He says they use the same materials for residential, commercial, and government work, the latter two of which are rigorously tested and inspected prior to and during installation. We have and continue to meet all of the standards of our industry and the regulations of the state of Connecticut. Until now, no state agency had previously found any records of J.J. Motus being paid as a vendor, and neither J.J. Motus nor UConn have responded to our questions asking if the concrete is tested for pyrrhotite. George Colley, NBC, Connecticut Troubleshooters.
A major development in the Troubleshooters investigation into crumbling foundations. Today, Governor Malloy asked the Attorney General's office to get involved because of our exclusive investigation. NBC Connecticut troubleshooter George Colley is here with what the governor is asking for. George.
Well, Jerry, the governor calls the issue affecting hundreds of homeowners in the eastern part of the state a serious problem. He wants to know the full scope of the issue and is now asking the Attorney General's office to assist in an investigation.
And now we're just trying to understand this as fully as possible.
In a letter, Governor Daniel Malloy requests the Attorney General assist the Department of Consumer Protection to conduct a civil investigation. They will determine if any rules were violated or if faulty concrete was knowingly poured and or supplied by the J.J. Motus Company.
To get the answers to the questions that we need to have answered. Well, you know, when did they know about this? What's going on here? Are there any steps, and what's the recourse?
Within the last year, these were just hairline cracks.
The Troubleshooters' first investigation, back on July 21st, found homeowners struggling to get help fixing their crumbling foundations. In the days since, more than 150 homeowners contacted NBC Connecticut, saying their basements are failing too. Most say their insurance companies denied coverage for their claims, so they have to pay up to hundreds of thousands of dollars out of pocket to fix the problem.
You seem to understand the impact that this could have on homeowners.
Devastating. I mean, devastating. The idea that you have to interrupt your life and support your house while a foundation is being built underneath it is not an easy proposition for anyone to be looking at, and it can be very expensive.
This distance here is actually what the house has gone up.
Homeowners, contractors, and building officials tell us the issues have only been reported with concrete supplied by one company, J.J. Motus Company of Stafford Springs. The troubleshooters reported that DCP investigated the issue in 2008. However, no warnings were sent to homeowners or inspectors until yesterday.
You know, this thing has been out there for a while, as you've shown. You know, what happened in the past, I'm not fully aware of yet. But what we should be doing is doing everything we can to get to the answers as quickly as possible for these homeowners, for these commercial owners, for even our own state structures.
The troubleshooters reported some believe an iron sulfide mineral called pyrrhotite is to blame. The governor specifically cites the mineral and its devastating effects in his letter. The U.S. Geological Survey and the company itself confirmed pyrrhotite is found in the quarry where they've retrieved aggregate for their cement for decades. We've repeatedly asked the company for comment on if they test for pyrrhotite. The company's declined comment on that to us, but apparently has given some answers to the governor.
There has been an explanation. Whether it's 100% accurate or not, I think it has to be determined. But one explanation is that this mineral can be in part of the strata and not above that and not below it. And you know, if you cut away the side of a hill, you'll see different strata, and each one of those stratas can have different things in it. So we're trying to understand what the significance of the time frame is.
All of the reported residential issues are for foundations poured between the early 1980s through 1998. J.J. Modis, declined to comment on the governor's request for an investigation, but in a statement released prior to our initial story, they told us they've received no reports of issues with concrete poured after 1998, and they've begun working with managers, geologists, and testing labs to review our manufacturing methods and materials. That review began after we first questioned them. The governor believes homeowners and the state need answers, and they need them as expeditiously as possible.
What's happening now through your work, our work, everybody's work at this point, is we're trying to get our arms around it.
A letter from a former state representative surfaces, changing the view of what the state knew about the crumbling foundation issue and when they knew it. Dated October 2002, former state representative Michael Cardin writes to a group of Eastern Connecticut legislators alerting them to the issue, specifically citing the problems incurred by Linda and Robert Tofolowski and several other families in districts Cardin's colleagues represented.
The houses that have failed here.
Linda told us in our original story on July 21st that she believes they were the first people to identify the problem allegedly associated with concrete supplied by the J.J. Modis Company.
Filed a report with Consumer Protection, and they wiped their hands of it. I went to my state rep. They tried, but they had their hands tied.
One of the battles that the Tofolowskis were fighting is they were hitting a brick wall at every step of the process.
Mike Cardin left the legislature in 2005. Now, reading the letter 13 years later, he remembers why he felt so strongly about sounding the alarm.
One constituent calls about an issue, follow up on. When 5 people call about it, it's a big issue. And I seem to remember that when Linda Tofolowski called me, and we had our initial conversation, she herself had probably at least a dozen, maybe close to 24 people.
Cardin says in the letter he was in frequent contact with the Department of Consumer Protection, but they'd taken no action. He asked the case to be transferred to the Attorney General's office so they can expedite a case against Modis, even giving 2 categories under which the Attorney General can sue.
I needed more allies to help fight their battle and fight the others.
Cardin says that all led to a meeting in April 2003 in the House Speaker's office. He remembers it was attended by legislators and representatives from the Attorney General's office, Department of Consumer Protection, the Home Builders Association, town building officials, the J.J. Modis Company, as well as legislative commissioners and some families with crumbling basements.
Our original outreach to them, it seemed to, I don't want to say fall on deaf ears, but it was something that wasn't high on their priority list. It was such a unknown to them. They maybe didn't really know how to address it.
This was maybe 1/8 of an inch, if anything.
The Department of Consumer Protection did not issue an advisory of the problem until current Commissioner Jonathan Harris visited a home with us 2 weeks ago. He sent out a warning to home inspectors and realtors just last week.
The Attorney General's office and the Department of Consumer Protection say they have no recollection and no records of the 2002 letter or 2003 meeting. Senator Blumenthal says he does remember, and there was no investigation because the DCP never asked him to pursue the case.
Last week, Governor Dan Malloy requested Attorney General George Jepsen assist the Department of Consumer Protection in a civil investigation, which now has begun. This comes after the troubleshooters found hundreds of homes with concrete supplied by J.J. Modis between the early 1980s through 1998, suffering from failing foundations.
In the last couple of years, we had a little bit of cracking.
A warning in 2002 would have helped Suzanne Piacentini. She purchased her existing South Windsor home in 2008.
What do you think about not having that information at the time of you buying?
Well, I think if we had that information, we probably would have had additional testing besides your normal home inspection, which everyone gets. And since we know now it's prevalent in Eastern Connecticut, we might not have bought here.
Suzanne first started monitoring cracks in her basement after seeing at least 4 homes in her neighborhood undergoing major renovations on their foundations, all of which can cost into the hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Why didn't people tell us?
We all had a common problem, which was the concrete was breaking down.
Neighbors say they were alerted when work on the first nearby home's foundation began in 2011. Contractors, building officials, and homeowners say J.J. Modis was the concrete company used exclusively by the now-defunct building company when the homes were built in the mid-1980s.
Knowing that the houses were built by the same contractor, we could all be affected by this problem.
Representatives from J.J. Motus declined to comment. They've declined answering any questions we've posed since our original story aired. In that story, and in the weeks since, the Troubleshooters featured homeowners from East Hartford to Ashford with failing foundations. In a comment for the original story, the man who identifies himself as president of J.J. Motus Company, John Patton, says the company's received no issues with any concrete supplied after 1998, and they've, quote, begun working with managers, geologists, and testing labs to review our manufacturing methods and materials. That review began after we first questioned them.
Just thinking of the homeowners.
Former State Representative Cardin says he never imagined the problem would grow to be as widespread as it is today, with at least hundreds of homes and entire neighborhoods affected with the issue.
Can you believe it took this long?
I can't. You know, I feel serving in the State House, you're obviously fighting a lot of battles, some small, some big. I felt that this was a big battle. I really feel that the evidence is clear and that if there is somebody that has the authority, they need to issue a cease and desist order against the Motus Company today.
George Colley, NBC Connecticut Troubleshooters.
We continue with the Troubleshooters exclusive. For the first time, the company at the center of our investigation into crumbling foundations is talking. Since July, the Troubleshooters have been investigating what's causing this devastating problem for homeowners in eastern Connecticut.
Experts and public officials say the connection is the J.J. Motus Company, which supplied the concrete. Tonight, a company spokesman is finally answering questions about what they knew and when they knew it. Here's troubleshooter George Colley's report.
There's a problem with foundations failing, possibly an epidemic in this area. When did you first hear there were any problems with concrete you had supplied?
Well, when I came on board, there was litigation at that point. And since then, we'd get calls, one or two a year from issues.
And what did you do? Did you do anything to try to figure out what was causing this, or did you test anything? Did you change the way that you?
We don't build foundation walls. I mean, we don't build foundations. We don't build sidewalks. We don't do slabs. We provide a building material.
Now, almost 15 years later, the number of homes with failing basement walls is in the hundreds, maybe more. J.J. Motus Concrete appears to be the connection between them all.
You can see how this stuff is growing, and it's just pushing up on the house.
According to contractors, structural engineers, scientists, and homeowners who've spoken with the troubleshooters. The problems arise a decade or more after the concrete is poured.
So far, we've gotten people from 81 to 98. And you had said you haven't gotten any reported problems for this issue since you got involved. Why do you think that's the case? Were any changes made to the way you get your sand or your aggregate or what you test before?
We continue to make it the same way. We continue to make it to the standards today. It could be that the building codes have changed. It could be that the way that to a certain extent, again, there's issues that happen.
Is it possible that it's because it takes 15 to 20 years and that because you haven't changed anything since the way it was gathered in the 80s and 90s, is it possible that we could be seeing this issue in this area for the next 30 years?
And that's why you need somebody to look at this issue.
About a year and a half ago is when I started noticing all the hairline cracks.
Patton is joining area town leaders and calling for a state task force of experts to identify the cause of the problem and find possible solutions. The Attorney General is also looking into it, assisting the Department of Consumer Protection in a civil investigation.
You need to have people that are going to look at this that are experts in their fields, because that's the only way you're going to really, that's the way you're going to answer. And we're happy to participate in that. We think that these homeowners need answers.
Home ownership is the American dream. My dream has turned into a nightmare.
The problem the troubleshooters exposed in July is felt by homeowners from East Hartford to Ashford.
The foundations move so much.
Over 250 emails and calls from viewers to NBC Connecticut detail the emotional and financial hardship their crumbling foundation is having on their lives.
Where this is built, this is our child's playroom.
With insurance not covering it, the out-of-pocket cost goes into the hundreds of thousands.
What am I going to do?
According to some experts, the cause is a mineral called pyrrhotite, which is found in the quarry where J.J. Motors retrieves stone for its concrete. Research suggests, over time, air and water oxidized the pyrrhotite, causing it to swell and expand, leading to spider cracking, pushing the house up off the foundation, eventually failing. Patton acknowledges the mineral is found in the quarry, which is owned by his father-in-law, but he disputes it's the cause. He says several other area concrete suppliers also have pyrrhotite in their aggregate.
We haven't gotten one person from New Haven, one person from Litchfield County, one person from Groton who called and said, "You're wrong, I've got this problem too." We don't have one person from northeastern Connecticut that says, "You're wrong." How is that possible?
I think you're making a generalization.
No, I'm going based on more than 250 emails that we've gotten from people crying on the phone to me when I call them about the experience they went through.
I understand what you're saying.
Patton places blame on faulty installation, not his company's concrete.
This type of reaction that we're seeing from people, can this really happen just from too much water being put inside?
I can tell you that there's a lot of things that can cause a foundation wall to fail. Water certainly plays a role, and it can play a role either in the beginning when the stuff is being installed. If you have a high water to cement ratio, there's a direct correlation between that and the durability of a wall.
However, Patton doesn't deny that some, even a majority, of the crumbling foundations could be comprised of J.J. Motors supplied concrete. Patton cites the single court judgment from 2003 finding his company not liable for providing faulty concrete as evidence to support his case, but acknowledges the company never looked into pyrrhotite as being a potential cause until recently, despite experts testifying in court to the problem at least as far back as 2010.
You brought that up to me originally. You know, that's really the first time that we had looked at this issue.
So that was the first time you had looked into pyrrhotite, was back in July?
When you kind of called and laid that on the table for us, and so I started reading it and researching it.
So what else could it be that could lead to just your company being named here?
Well, because we did have a large market share around here.
What do you want to say to the people whose lives have been negatively impacted by concrete that was supplied by J.J. Motors? Maybe there's a lot of different hands in there, but people's lives have been ruined. And what would you like to say to them?
We absolutely sympathize with what they're going on, but they have to understand that we don't build foundation walls. There's many issues that can do it, but I think that the main thing is that they deserve some answers to the questions that they're asking, which is why we're supporting a task force, which is why we want to assist them in that, because we're going to get answers and you're also going to get some solutions, and that's where we got to go from there.
For some we've met along the way over the last few months, those answers can't come soon enough. George Colley, NBC, Connecticut Troubleshooters. Nearly 20 years after the first reported crumbling foundation, affected homeowners streamed into the Vernon Center Middle School looking for answers and solutions.
Looking at the size of this crowd, it speaks louder and more powerfully than, frankly, any of us up here could ever try to achieve.
The scope and scale of these issues is truly unprecedented, at least in my experience.
Many of these homeowners contacted NBC Connecticut following the original July 21st investigation, which started with an email to the Troubleshooters by Ellen Peliquin.
Your tip started this all. What did you think about all the people that came here today that are affected by this problem and what you heard from the state?
I am absolutely overwhelmed. And when I first found out that I had this problem, I really thought I was alone.
Those sentiments were echoed by some of the people we've met along the way.
I knew it was a problem, but not this big. This is incredible.
Phil Lugenbuehl and 4 other households in his family are dealing with the repercussions of having a failed concrete basement wall. He and others say the only remedy is replacing their foundation, costing it to the hundreds of thousands out of pocket because insurance denies the claim.
I'm very, very pleased to see the turnout. I'm excited for the state of Connecticut to see the enormous amount of people that have this problem.
Because of the NBC Connecticut investigation, the governor called on the Attorney General's office to assist the Department of Consumer Protection in a civil investigation. Updates were given by the Attorney General's office, the Insurance Department, and DCP Commissioner Jonathan Harris.
It's encouraging that people are coming out because,
A lot of people thought they were isolated and didn't know what to do, and now they realize that they have people that can help them. It's also a little, daunting in proving that we knew that the potential magnitude, the scope was large.
Connecticut Senator Richard Blumenthal and Congressman Joseph Courtney also told the crowd how they're seeking federal solutions to the growing crisis.
You know the old saying, a picture's worth 1,000 words. This picture is worth 1,000 words. Not just the number, but the passion and the anxiety that folks rightly feel.
For Linda Tofolowski, this day is a long time coming. Her home's concrete basement walls began deteriorating in the mid-1990s. While she's encouraged by seeing everyone in the same room, she's still looking for answers.
It's good. I'm glad somebody's listening. Maybe something will happen, but I'm guarded because the ball has been dropped too many times in the past.
While no solutions are yet on the table, many left, saying the future seems a little brighter.
But do you feel a little bit of hope?
I can see the light at the end of the tunnel now, maybe. Possibly something's going to happen.